Welcome to this final session in the economy strand. Taking the PIP, who can reform welfare? I'm Rob Lyons. I'm the convener of the Academy of Ideas Forum. I've been hanging around like a bad smell in this room all day. This is, as I said, the final session in this strand. Lots of commentators are worried about the ballooning cost of welfare and the impact that has on the economy, both in terms of the money, in terms of government spending, but also the impact it has on individuals and the workforce. Earlier this year, there was fury, for example, about the Motability scheme and how much was being spent on that. A fleet of cars that apparently is worth £14 billion. Yet doing something about welfare has not proved to be easy. The government suffered serious embarrassment earlier this year when its attempts to rein in personal independence payments had to be hurriedly scaled back in the face of a backbench revolt. So what is to be done? Are politicians prepared to have the difficult conversations from reducing working age entitlements to increasing the retirement age? Is the debate unnecessarily gloomy about the UK's ability to afford welfare in the future? Is it a moral issue, or will we face an abrupt financial reckoning if nothing is done? And to discuss these points, starting on my immediate left, we have Jean-Andre Prager, who is Senior Fellow at Policy Exchange, and earlier this year he co-authored the report For Whose Benefit? Proposals to Reform Health and Disability Benefits and to Create a New Social Contract. Previously, he was the Prime Minister's Special Advisor in the Downing Street Policy Unit for Rishi Sunak from 2022 to 2024, covering both the Department for Work and Pensions and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. Then on my immediately right is Lisa Mackenzie. She is a working class academic. She's author of Lockdown Diaries of the Working Class. Her work focuses upon issues of social and class inequality and builds upon the narratives of working class communities collected through political ethnographic research. And I believe you're now a playwright as well?
Yeah.
Hey!
Well done.
Well done. Okay. So another string to Lisa's bow. Third is Dave Clements on the far left. Dave is a writer and a policy advisor with over 2 decades of experience working in the public sector, particularly in children's services, health and social care. He's written for a variety of publications, including The Guardian, Huffington Post and Spite. He's also author of the forthcoming book, The Crisis in the Classroom. And finally, on my far right, purely positionally, let's not start that discussion. I have Gawain Towler. Gawain, between 2004 and 2017, Gawain was press officer for UKIP, initially in the European Parliament in Brussels, and from 2009 heading the department in London. Until recently, he was head of press for Reform UK, and he has since been elected by members to sit on the party's governing board. Is that correct? He's an international political strategist and historian, has written for most national publications. When he's not working, he can mostly be found in pub gardens and ancient churches across these islands. And if you follow him on social media, there's one church or pub after another. So I've asked the speakers to speak for about 6 minutes each and then get out to what should be a lively discussion. So, Jean-Andre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. As we're at a festival of ideas, I thought I'd better start my remarks with a fairly fundamental idea, and that is the idea of disability. I think we have either a notion of disabled people as superheroes or disabled people as incapable. And this idea distracts from the heroic concept of disabled people, distracts from the very human desires and needs of disabled people. They are just people, like me, like you, like everyone here. But we have this notion of them, which I think is very, very difficult, and others disabled people. But on the other hand, we see disabled people as incapable. This is a reductive quality for our desire to protect, one in which disabled people recognise and struggle to overcome. Protection is often manifest with infantilization, and the enormous economic and creative potential of disabled people is overlooked and undervalued. And disabled people are too often seen as through a cost lens, rather than in consideration of their potential. And therefore, to reform our welfare system, I think we need to fundamentally reconsider how we see disabled people, and we need to recalibrate it to one where we try to enable people rather than to support and mostly to protect. And part of this issue revolves around the good move, in my view, from a medical model of disability to a social model of disability. And put simply, that the medical model, which kind of existed before the 1980s, was one that suggested that disability was a deficiency in the individual, while the social model views disability because of the barriers put forward by society. And being disabled now is seen just as a manifestation of the diversity of society. And the changing perception of disability has led to an increasing number of people as self-declaring as disabled. Today, 1 in 4 people consider themselves disabled. There are about 600,000 people eligible for disability benefits in 1990, and now that is about 7 million people. There's a particular increase in recent years in the number of young people claiming these benefits and people with mental health conditions. Nearly 1 in 10 people of working age are now on at least one sickness or disability benefit. Over 2.8 million people are out of work with long-term sickness benefits. 1,000 people a day are claiming personal independence payment, and that would mean over the course of a year the size of the city of Leicester, and 5,000 people a day are now deemed incapable of work, and over the course of a week that would mean they could fill the size of the O2. So given that framework that I've just set out, I think we need to look at fundamentally what our benefit system is trying to do and whether it is the right framework given the great numbers now that are coming through the gateway onto these benefits. And so I'm going to talk about personal independence payment. And this is an extra cost benefit. But given the number of people now claiming disability benefits and personal independence payment, one has to consider whether all these people, they may well be disabled, all these people actually incur an extra cost. So we need to consider whether there's some types of support that might be better suited to them than merely a financial benefit. So I'm going to talk about a few things that I think could help change the debate and the narrative around these benefits. Firstly, I actually think some of the things that the government tried to do in the previous reforms were actually quite good. That's not actually been discussed a lot, but the idea that you shouldn't have an extra financial incentive in the work capability assessment to show what you cannot do, I think is a positive thing. And I think too many times our benefit system is framed around trying to show what you cannot do rather than what you could be able to do. So I think that was a positive by removing the work capability assessment. And they'll do that by 2028. And so there's a couple of ideas that I have. One, probably my most controversial idea, is especially for young people, personal independence payment, while it's an extra cost benefit, should become a conditional benefit. That means that people, the reason behind that is because PIP claimants, for example, 40% increase for young people 16 to 25 since 2019. And I think this is really damaging. And 70% of young people now claiming personal independence payment are claiming it for mental health problems. And we know that individuals who apply for PIP, 37% of them are in work when they claim. But within a year, it's only 23%. So while it's an extra cost benefit, it does lead to a reduction in employment. And therefore, I think there's a real argument to be had about ensuring people have a stake in our society. And therefore, personal independence payment for young people in particular, 16 to 30, should be made a conditional benefit on partaking in something in society. That doesn't actually mean just work. It means volunteering, possibly education, some form of formal employment, but basically creating the sense that you're involved in society. And secondly, I think our benefits are merely a test about getting on to some sort of financial support. So therefore, when you go to a benefits assessment, you never discuss what types of needs you might have. It's all about what you cannot do to get the extra money. So I think assessments need to be fundamentally changed into more of a conversation around what the society can do to help you. So for example, they should discuss things like access to work in a benefits assessment. Rather, it's just merely about what you cannot do to get the money that you need. And finally, because I think I'm probably running out of time, we have a very static benefit system. Our system hasn't changed since 2012, 2013, when the Welfare Reform Act came into force. But our society has fundamentally changed over that period. And so I think there's a level at which Parliament has become impotent and not done its job of actually reevaluating whether these benefits are correctly are actually correctly helping people. So I think every couple of years, frankly, the assessment criteria for these benefits should be reevaluated and actually should be voted on in Parliament. And I think it's a great shame that we don't have a more of an open conversation, frankly, about these benefits. And instead, every time we try to reform it, it becomes a massive, and you can see it in March, a massive debate rather than an iterative debate that happens all the time about whether we've got the right level of support for the right types of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Right.
Is it me? Yes, thank you for inviting me, and I think this is a great panel actually, and a really important subject. So you were right when you said that, you know, I'm a working class academic, but what do I do? Well, I'm a sociologist, and for 20 years I've been doing research, ethnographic research, which is bottom up, working with people, and particularly always with working class people. The first piece of research I did, which was for my PhD, was on the council estate where I used to live. And this is important to the wider issue, because what was I doing? I was interviewing and working with women who lived on the estate, mothers mostly, and just talking to them about their lives and what was happening. And I'd done an undergraduate degree in sociology and social policy. So, you know, the idea that, you know, the state and policy, it sort of interacts with people's lives. I knew that from personal experience, but also from the education that I'd got. So talking to mothers on the estate, what they often told me was the way that their lives were completely interactive with state intervention, with benefits, with welfare, and particularly how the welfare system was actually a system, and a system that didn't really work for them. And I'll give you an example of this before I sort of go on to the other areas. One of the things that we talk a lot about, especially in working class communities, when other people are talking about working class communities, they talk about family life, and whether, you know, that usually working class families have got the deficit model, usually doing something wrong, or they're accused of doing something wrong. Well, one of the things that the mothers told me about the benefit system, it was a council estate, so everybody lived in social housing. Most of the mothers worked part-time. But one of the things that they said is, in order to survive, to get a house that they could afford to live in, they had to say that they were a single parent. And it didn't matter whether they were or not, they had to say that. And the system wouldn't allow them to kind of live or be as a family, because if your husband or your partner was also in a very low paid job, you'd kind of be penalized for that. So what families were doing is just trying to make the best of things. And I remember the last question I also always asked women was, you know, what is your hope for the future? Because when you talk to mothers on council estates, you know, there's lots of problems and lots of things that are going wrong. So I always say, what's your hope for the future? And many of those women and those mothers said that they hoped that they'd get a full-time job and their partner would get a full-time job and they could live together as a proper family. So the ambition was not to be part of a welfare dependency culture. That was never what it was about. But unfortunately, the structure of the system, which is almost like a race to the bottom, meant that they were left with little choices but to sort of play into a stereotype about them, and then allowed that stereotype to constantly be told around them. So when we're talking about welfare, what are we talking about? We're talking about housing, we're talking about pensions, we're talking about unemployment benefit as well as disability benefits. It's not one thing, it's a number of things, and they do all interrelate. At the moment, we've got a housing crisis, that is affecting welfare. It's absolutely affecting welfare. And again, I can give examples of this. I'm writing a new book about what's happening in class in Britain. I'm talking to lots of men. I'm talking to lots of young men with jobs. These are not unemployed people who are now finding themselves in HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. Why? Because of what a one-bedroom flat is out of their reach. And so what I'm also talking to is other men and women who are working and are underemployed. They can't find enough employment. So what is happening is they're looking to find other ways to try and top up their wages. Or if they're on benefits, the housing benefit is not covering it covers social rent, but getting a social housing is absolutely impossible now. So private rent, it doesn't even nearly cover it. So what they are having to do is find other ways to try and pay that. And sometimes that means looking for getting a higher welfare benefit, and that might be disability benefits. What I suppose I'm going to finish with, because I wanted to have the debate here, is employment is also, and it's also sort of tangled in this as well. Good employment that pays people a decent wage so they can, so they can stand on their own 2 feet, so they can find somewhere to live. There are incredible rates of underemployment at the moment, especially for young people, not being able to find jobs that will, a 30, 40-hour job. They can't find it. There's 15-hour jobs here, 10-hour jobs there. That's not proper work. So I mean, this is what I'm sort of looking at figures at the moment, and I'm really thinking about this and thinking about the people I'm interviewing. We have 1.7 million people unemployed. That's 4.8 of the population, and that's rising. I guess that we have got an extremely high unemployment rate, but it is being hidden in the welfare system. The Thatcher government started this when they tried to hide the unemployment rates in the 1980s, and they moved lots of people onto disability benefits. I imagine that's where we are again. I've got a yellow card. So I think, while we're talking about welfare, I think we need to really be honest about what is happening in our economy.
Okay, thank you. Right, Dave.
Thank you. We have a welfare problem. The damage done by lockdown, for instance, can't be underestimated. 2 years of unprecedented state intervention, 1.5 years of furlough for 12 million people. Now we've got 1 in 10 people of working age on sickness or disability benefits, 1 million young people on NEETs or not in education, employment or training. PIP claims are set to double this decade, especially since those reforms failed. Long-term sickness increased by 500,000 between 2019 and 2022. The rise of the sickfluencer, which is an online influencer, was blamed for the abuse of the Access to Work scheme. Mental health claims for that scheme rose from 5% a decade ago to 1/3 of all of those claims. The cost of the scheme has doubled in 7 years. Claims have included things like claims for the smartwatches, wobble boards, fidget toys, these kinds of things. A Freedom of Information request in April found that over 500,000 people signed up to the now infamous Motability scheme, many of them with things like anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and ADHD. So I think a lot of our discontent today, both material and spiritual, started, or at least got worse, during lockdown. But I think other trends, such as the rise in ADHD, the rise in autism, mental health problems, behavioural issues, these all stretch back much longer, sometimes a couple of decades, or perhaps more. So we do have a welfare problem. But looked at another way, it's not really about welfare at all. The title of this session, PIPs, who can reform welfare? I think in a way that's the wrong question to ask. It's not really about welfare. It's about us. It's about the needs crisis in society. It's true that there's rapidly growing welfare claims, as we've mentioned already, and some conditions that claimants cite should perhaps not qualify. And some schemes are perhaps open to exploitation. However, I think we should be thinking about reforming ourselves. I think we've become dysfunctional, dependent, broken. We're not working. We're signing ourselves off. We're disabling ourselves. We're seeking out our own vulnerabilities. Of course, some people are sick and some people are disabled and some people are playing the system. But the question I'd ask is, are they, either of those two groups, responsible for what I would describe as a needs explosion? I think we need to look beyond PIP and the welfare debate to some extent as well. I'm the father of a boy with ADHD and autism. And I've kind of noticed similarities in this discussion around the welfare system with the SEND system, which is the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities System. And also there's parallels with the rise in neurodiversity, or claims and diagnoses and special educational needs around, again, autism, ADHD and other similar conditions. So again, you've got this problem of a real, genuine need existing there, but at the same time there's this explosion of needs and there's an overwhelming of the system, and that's happening both in the education system and in welfare. In the 20 years to 2023, the number of children on disability living allowance, or DLA, which is the children's equivalent of PIP in England and Wales, it doubled. 1 in 16 children now receive DLA. In 2023, 4 out of 5 of those children cited a learning disability, a behavioural disorder, or ADHD as their main condition. Compared to PIP, it's quite comparatively small in terms of numbers, but most of those children who are on a DLA go on to PIPs. So, what can be done about it? I think all of these individuals, the children and the adults, are responding to social pressures and cultural signals. They're told their difficulties are in their heads, which in a way they are, but not in the way that's meant. They're offered labels to describe the problems they face. Misbehaving kids are told they have ADHD or a conduct disorder. Troubled adults, unable to cope with the workplace, are signed off sick, or they're told that they're suffering from stress. So instead of taking responsibility for ourselves and our families, our schools, our workplaces, we make a dubious claim in both senses of the word. So just to conclude, it might sound unlikely, but I wonder if we rebuilt a more old-fashioned sense of ourselves as independent, robust and responsible individuals, would the welfare problem solve itself?
Thank you very much. Gawain.
Thank you, Rob. I have to admit I'm not a huge expert in the field, so bear with me. I think that from all the figures that we've been hearing, we clearly have this explosion, as you call the need explosion. I think is a very good way of describing it. When I think of it is getting to the point, because, and I think the cover-up of employment is extremely important here, just like we have 50% of people going to university. I think that's more about masking unemployment figures than it is, in fact, trying to educate people, particularly given some of the things that they are taught. But I think what's happened, particularly in schools, and once it's in your head as a child, it becomes your default position as you go through life. And it has become aspirational to have a condition. It's a bit like the old, you've got an ology, but now you've got a problem. But it's not a problem because it's aspirational, and you can get extra time on your exams, and you can get a financial benefit from having a problem. And therefore, we are now building in this into our entire society. But the bottom line is we are broke. We are broke as a society. We are we know that next month we're going to have a budget that's going to tax us more, and you don't tax yourself into prosperity. But the problem with the welfare explosion, and as was seen very, very clearly in that the rebellion, the backbench rebellion, that didn't stop. It wasn't about cutting $5 billion off welfare spending. It was cutting $5 billion off the increase in welfare spending. It wasn't even touching the sides when it comes to the major problem. And I know, yes, of course, those people who have genuine disabilities have to be looked after. But I believe that there is a welfare fatigue in the productive aspects of the economy who are paying more and more tax to see their neighbours not working and receiving the money that I've been working for, and the next door is getting it. And I think that what we are seeing, and I think as we go through the next 4 years of this government failing to address this because it can't, even if it might want to, the question is who can do it. In the past, you'd have said, well, if it's a welfare issue, you can trust Labour. Labour have a better chance because they're trusted on this subject. Well, they're not anymore. And so therefore, who can address it? And the only sort of hope that I've got here is that this reality, as we look across the country and see this vast increase in claim after claim after claim and the Motability scheme, it's not actually, and I was listening to the Radio 4 the other day, I think there's 43,000 people have claimed on the Motability scheme for ADHD or something like that. So it's not huge numbers, but there again, 43,000 BMWs is quite expensive. And I do feel that sometimes the Motability scheme is a way of getting people to have electric cars who wouldn't be able to afford them anyhow. So there is that aspect to it. But I do think that the Overton window, just as it has moved very rapidly on immigration, the Overton window on welfare spending is also shifting fast. I go around the country 2 or 3 times a week doing public meetings, and I can feel this feeling that, hold on, this isn't working. We cannot continue like this. And I do agree. I mean, we talk about resilience. We want our children to be resilient. But what we teach them is the benefits of not being resilient. You actually win. You can game the system. You can do this. And I think the tragedy of people being forced to live apart, even though they want to be in a family, the sociological impacts of that are disgraceful and diabolical. We shouldn't be having a welfare system that actually mitigates about people bringing their children up more effectively. But I go back to, whenever I think about this subject, I think about Kennedy's inauguration speech. We've now got the opposite, haven't we? Think not what you can do for your country. Think what the country can do for you. And that is where we've got. And in the end, we will break unless we try to handle this. But I don't think Labour can do it.
Okay, thank you very much.